We will begin with the singing of O Canada, led by Jody, Megan, and Juliet.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Good morning, and thank you for coming out today. First, I'd like to thank Mother Nature. I was worried all week. My name is Matthew Logan, and I'll be presiding over today's ceremony. I wish to thank the Quantum guides, Jody, Megan, and Juliet, Alan Eaton, Scott Barrett, John Christensen, and Diane Archer, the 746 Royal Canadian Air Cadet Squadron, the Senior Centre, and the Newton Recreation Centre for making this program possible today. Remembrance Day, formerly known as Armistice Day, and still is in some countries, was brought into being by King George V in 1919 to be marked with a minute of silence for those who fell during the Great War at precisely the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the time the Great War ended in 1918. In Canada, the name was changed to Remembrance Day in 1931, and November 11th was made the only day to mark it. A second minute of silence was added after the Second World War. In total, over 100,000 Canadians died in World War I, World War II, the Korean War, peacekeeping, and Afghanistan. This year marks a number of milestone anniversaries. Today, I would like to focus on two events. The first is the 100th anniversary of the Royal Canadian Air Force, the RCAF. When I served in the reserves, I did so as an infantry soldier, but I have a very strong connection to the RCAF. I was born in Nova Scotia as my father was stationed at Canadian Forces Base Greenwood. Besides spending my first 9 years living on the base, my younger brother who joined the Canadian Army at first, he then transferred to the RCAF and had a lengthy military career. I also had a school friend here in Delta, Michael Erickson, who joined the RCAF in the early 1980s and became a CF-18 fighter pilot. He was stationed at CFB Comox. Michael came from a family of fishermen. In early April 1988, a fishing boat off the west coast of Vancouver Island radioed it was in distress as the weather was quite severe. Due to high winds, search and rescue felt the use of a helicopter or a Buffalo aircraft was too dangerous. Michael had fished in these waters years earlier and felt he could find the missing boat, despite the weather, and transmit its coordinates back to the rescue center. In trying to locate the boat, however, and due to a navigational system error, Michael crashed into a mountain on the coast. Today I will remember Michael Erickson, Delta, BC. The Royal Canadian Air Force was established on April 1st, 1924, even though Canadians had previously flown in World War I, as over 20,000 Canadians volunteered to fly with the Royal Flying Corps and the Royal Naval Corps, including 3 Canadians who received the Victoria Cross. The RCAF also participated in the Korean conflict in Afghanistan, as well as many other rescue and other operations around the world. However, the RCAF really became a force during World War II. Between 1939 and 1945, 232,000 men and 17,000 women served in the Royal Canadian Air Force. The RCAF suffered 17,101 casualties during the war, including 13,408 deaths. By the end of the war, Canada had the fourth largest air force in the world. As I mentioned earlier, I grew up on an RCAF base in Nova Scotia. My father was in the Air Force, and he started out as a bomber pilot in the Force 26 Squadron, number 6 Group in England, part of Bomber Command during World War II. He joined the RCAF in his early 20s and started out piloting Lancaster bomber aircraft in 1943 out of Linton-on-Ouse near York, England. In spring 1944, his squadron switched over to Halifax bombers. He and his crew were basically the same lads for most of the operations they flew, so I can imagine how close they all were. My father met his future wife and my mother in York, England, and they married on the 17th of June 1944. 12 days later, on June 29th, on the way back from a mission to the French city of Metz, his Halifax bomber was attacked over Normandy. My dad held the severely damaged plane as steady as he could so his crew could all bail out. When my dad finally went to jump, he got lodged in the hatch and the plane exploded, throwing him into the air. Fortunately, he landed on the ground with minor injuries. His crew all survived the ordeal and did manage to find each other. They decided to split up as to better their chances of not being picked up by the Germans. Of the 7 crew, 3 evaded capture and made it back to England, including my father. 2 were captured and became prisoners of war. However, for the navigator, Pilot Officer Hugh Burney of Toronto, age 22, and mid-upper gunner Pilot Officer Donald Jameson of Winnipeg, age 20, they were picked up by the Gestapo, and because they were wearing civilian clothing at the time and in possession of German mess tins, they were considered terrorists by the Gestapo. And around the 22nd of August, 1944, they were taken out to a wooded area and shot in cold blood. They have no known grave. These were my dad's friends and crew. Today I will also remember Hugh Burney and Donald Jameson. As I mentioned earlier, this year has a number of milestone anniversaries. The big one that everyone's probably familiar with is the 80th anniversary of D-Day, the invasion of Normandy in 1944. The Normandy battle lasted from June 6th to August 30th. Canada had a major role in the Battle of Normandy. I'll now ask Scott Barrett to talk briefly about the 80th anniversary of one of Canada's most important battles. Scott?
At the beginning of September 1944, many of the Allied troops thought the war was just about done as they had the Germans on the run. One of the Allies' main objectives after Normandy was to secure a large deep-water port in Belgium, since the supply lines back to Normandy were just way too long.
On September 4th, the British did take Antwerp, but British Field Marshal Montgomery at this point pinned his hopes on a lightning airborne operation called Market Garden.
However, they hadn't secured the Scheldt estuary, which was about 80 kilometers of rivers, marshes, and islands that ran all the way from the North Sea all the way up to the city. That's a distance equal to going up the Fraser River from Steveston to Mission. Now, Antwerp was a key requirement in ending the war, and Hitler knew this. His main objective of Operation Watch on the Rhine, also known as the Battle of the Bulge in December of 1944, was to recapture Antwerp. So the Germans, who'd been on the run, decided to stay and keep the estuary out of Allied hands, which meant that no ship could get to Antwerp. After the failure of Operation Market Garden, which some of you may know from the movie A Bridge Too Far, Montgomery had to fix his mistake and clear the estuary. But by now the Germans were firmly dug in with strong defensive positions. The 1st Canadian Army, which had been successful in fighting up the French coast, clearing small port towns and cities, was given this dangerous task. Locked in combat for all of October and well into November, this turned out to be the Canadians' most important campaign, what became the Battle of the Scheldt, also known as the Forgotten Battle. Now, I won't get into all the details, but the fighting was fierce. The Germans had dug in, the terrain was marshes, rivers, and waterlogged ground, so the use of armor was greatly hampered, and that made the fighting extremely arduous and extremely costly. At the end of the 5-week campaign, the 1st Canadian Army, which included British and Polish units also, captured some 41,000 German prisoners, but suffered 12,873 casualties, killed, missing, or wounded, of which half were Canadians. Now, the battle ended in early November, but when the Canadians cleared the last of the German resistance, it actually took until November 28th that the first ships arrived in Antwerp with much-needed supplies. Now, if only the Scheldt estuary was given the priority it deserved back in September by Montgomery, the battle probably would have been a much quicker affair, saving many lives and possibly ending the war earlier. There are two cemeteries, one in Belgium and one in the Netherlands, that have most of the Canadian soldiers who gave their lives in this battle.
Thank you, Scott. Remembrance Day is a day designated to remember those who fell during a time of war and peace in service to the country. Many of you have received a card. If you haven't received one, we have a bit of time, so if you want to come get one, you're welcome to. The majority of these cards, are from the Battle of the Scheldt, but I've also included some RCAF soldiers and sailors from every major conflict in our history. You can also look up the person on the online Canadian Virtual War Memorial for additional information about this particular service person. I ask that you take the time to look over the card and remember this soldier during the 2 minutes of silence that we have today. They should all be remembered for their sacrifice. I'll give you a minute or two to look over the card, and if you'd like to come get one, please do it now. At this point, I would like to ask Diane Archer of the Senior Center, Melissa Charlton, Kathy Caravan, and Megan Wallace of the Kwantlen Guys, and Lieutenant Foster of the Air Cadets to read out names of a few Canadians who gave their life for their country.
Private Frank Yates died April the 9th, 1917, Vimy Ridge, France. Buried in Petit, Vimy, British Cemetery. Age 25, Canadian Infantry, Central Ontario Regiment. Son of William Henry and Amy Yates of 75 Badger Row Avenue, Toronto, Ontario.
Lieutenant John Douglas Clouston died on March 14, 1942. Name inscribed on the Halifax Memorial. Age 32. Navy unit, Royal Canadian Naval Volunteer Reserve, HMS Loosestrife. Son of William and Evelyn Stewart Clouston of Westmount, Quebec.
Rifleman Ronald Murray Kinney died on December 25, 1941, Stanley Fort, Hong Kong. Buried in Hong Kong, age 19. Army Unit, Royal Rifles of Canada, born Beaver Brook, New Brunswick. Son of Arnold and Agnes Kinney of Beaver Brook, New Brunswick.
Private William Pine, born Elora, Ontario, died August 19, 1942 in Dieppe, France, buried at the Dieppe Canadian Cemetery. Age 24, Royal Hamilton Light Infantry, Army, son of William B. Prine and of Mary A. Prine.
Wood, Toronto, Ontario, died December 10, 1951 in South Korea. Buried United Nations Cemetery in Busan, South Korea. Age 21, Army Unit, Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry. Spouse of June Winfred Wood of Toronto, Ontario. Son of Frederick and Violet Wood of Toronto, Ontario.
We will now have a short poem written and read by John Christensen of the Newton Seniors Writing Club, titled Give a Tender Thought.
Give a tender thought. Once a year, for a week or so, we salute the crosses row on row, or wear a poppy on our chest and believe that we have done our best. Then the rush to Christmas that begins all too soon blots the thoughts of the soldier's doom. Where amongst the frenzied rush do we think of bygone wars and sacrifices made by men and women in countless scores? Day by day, the whole year through, we must give a tender thought for those who secured our freedom in wars that have been fought. That's the least that we can do to try and pay a debt that has no end, to let it show and make them know the heartfelt thanks that we send.
Thank you.
This poem is from a child's perspective. The poppy. Why are they selling poppies, Mummy? Selling poppies in town today. The poppies, my child, are flowers of love for the men who marched away. But why have they chosen a poppy, Mummy? Why not a beautiful rose? Because, my child, men fought and died in the fields where the poppy grows. But why are the poppies red, Mummy? Why are the poppies so red? Red is the color of blood, my child, the blood our soldiers shed. The heart of the poppy is black, Mummy. Why does it have to be so black? Black, my child, is the symbol of grief for the men who never came back. But, Mummy, why are you crying so? Your tears are giving me pain. My tears are my fears for you, my child, for the world is forgetting again.
Thank you very much, John, for those two wonderful poems on this day today. Thank you. We will now proceed with the singing of the poem In Flanders Fields. The poem was written by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae in 1915 during the Second Battle of Ypres. McCrae, a surgeon, wrote the poem as a result of presiding over the burial of his friend Alex Helmer, who was killed in the battle. After the poem, we'll have the Act of Remembrance read by Alan Eaton, followed by the last post. Then 2 minutes of silence and a final tribute. At the end of the final tribute, that'll be the end of the program. Once the cadets have cleared their posts from the cenotaph, people with wreaths are welcome to lay a wreath, and everybody else is welcome to leave their poppy on the cenotaph. And now, In Flanders Fields, sung by Megan, Jody, and Juliet.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow. Loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high, if he break faith with us who die. We shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields, in Flanders fields, in Flanders fields.
They shall grow, not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not worry them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we shall remember them.
of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you. Lay your body down. Find the cost of freedom buried in the ground. Mother Earth will swallow you. Lay your body down. Find the cost of freedom.